Welcome back to another episode of Everything You Need to Know Before You Buy, a series inspired by Jake Baldino's Before You Buy series, where I gather all the news and trailers of an upcoming game and formulate an opinion on whether you should buy this game or not. All the information in this video is available online. I just wanted to compile everything into one video for convenience and the fact that I don't have a review copy. Because of this, I'm in the same position as you, the viewer. I don't really know if the game is actually good or bad until the release. But the whole aim is to give you some knowledge and guidance for said upcoming game. So today I'm going to talk about Live Alive. Not Live Alive or Live and Evil, that one might be stretching it. It's actually pronounced Live Alive according to the Nintendo Direct narrator, so I'm going to go with that. Live Alive was announced on February 9th this year, as said before in a Nintendo Direct. Initially I never heard of this game before, but I got interested by the end of it. There's a lot to break down in the announcement trailer, which I'll go through later. But first, let's talk about the game's background. In the Nintendo Direct, it announced the remake of the original Live Alive, which claimed that it never released outside of Japan. I did some background research to see if it was true, and it turns out Live Alive was only released in Japan in 1994. It'll be its 28th anniversary this year. Additionally, it was developed by Squaresoft, now known as Square Enix, and was on the Super Famicom, aka the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, or SNES for short, over in the West. The game was considered a commercial failure, only selling 270,000 copies. If you compare that with other games released in 1994 like Final Fantasy VI and Donkey Kong Country, both that sold millions worldwide, even if we consider Japan sales only, there's quite the considerable gap. Makes sense that it was considered a failure. This brings up the question, how did Live Alive get a remake? Well, the director and writer, Takashi Tokita, made many attempts for a sequel or remake over the years, but to no avail. For those who don't know Takeda, he was also in charge of Parasite Eve and Chrono Trigger, which was released a year after Live Alive. Not to mention that Live Alive and Chrono Trigger was the first two games that he directed. Quite the turnaround if you ask me. Takeda would later direct and produce more games for Square Enix until he joined the team that was developing Octopath Traveler, an upcoming JRPG at the time which was known for its unique art style called HD 2D. Using SNES-style character sprites in conjunction with high-definition effects and 3D environments. When Takeda saw this, he was inspired to make Live Alive in this style. Unfortunately for him, the CEO of Square Enix, Yosuke Matsuda, expressed a desire to remake older titles using HD 2D, proposing a list of titles with Live Alive being at the top. The remake would start development in 2019, later to be released on the Nintendo Switch July 22nd, 2022 worldwide. Next, let's talk about the game itself. The announcement trailer did a good job going through the story. You play as 7 protagonists from different time eras, each with their own scenario. There's prehistory, Imperial China, Twilight of Edo Japan, the Wild West, present day, the near future, and the distant future. You can play in any order, but once you complete all 7 by defeating a reoccurring antagonist, you get introduced to a new protagonist, the 8th scenario set in the Middle Ages. I assume back then this was meant to be a surprise for the player after completing the first 7. Even the old cover ad shows the 7 protagonists. But for some reason, in the character trailer 2 days after the announcement, it blatantly reveals the 8th character. No idea why. Actually, in the same trailer it shows the final scenario after the 8th, where you use 4 of the first 7 protagonists, but I won't go any further beyond that. As for the gameplay, Live Alive uses a turn-based battle system. It was a popular genre back then, however, you can argue that turn-based is considered old-fashioned in today's gaming industry. But Live Alive has this one feature that puts itself above some other turn-based games. You see, when you go in battle, you fight on a 7x7 grid. You can move around and position yourself to attack since your skills have a certain range to them. Also, you can use items, pass your turn, or run away like any other JRPG. There is a turn-based order based on speed, and whether you move or attack, it uses up some of your turn, if not all of it. Some attacks may have to charge up, which takes up turns, whereas if you move around, it doesn't necessarily end your turn, unless you move a bit too long, allowing the enemy to make their move. With any turn-based JRPG, there's also a leveling system. Due to how unique each scenario is, your protagonist will be in an assortment of levels. For example, in the distant future scenario, you don't battle anyone throughout, excluding the Captain Square minigame, until the end where you fight the boss. Whereas the prehistory scenario, you'll be fighting in numerous random battles, grinding up levels until the end of the scenario. As said before, you can use and obtain items throughout each scenario, ranging from healing items to equipment like armor and accessories. In some scenarios you can craft items, and in others you can obtain them by finding a secret boss or completing a specific condition. Moving on, this section I'm going to go through the differences between the remake and the original Live Alive. First, the biggest difference is the HD 2D art style, obviously. It's the reason why we have a Live Alive remake in the first place. Take a look at this picture of the original game where we see the behemoth in the distant future scenario, this green sprite over here, and this is what the behemoth looks like in the remake. I think where the art really shined in the original was in battle. The enemies and boss could take up to like 12 squares on the grid, and because of that space there was a lot more detail on the sprite. Though in the overworld it looks simple, most likely due to limitations. Now we're in 2022, there's no limitations like back then. It's a complete upgrade both in and out of battle. For example, if you compare the original and remake of the beginning of the Twilight of Edo Japan scenario, you can tell that the developers went above and beyond with the environment, combining sprites with polygonal objects. The second change is that there's voice acting now. Of course, voice acting wasn't really a thing on the SNES. For a game that has 8 stories, there's a lot of reading to go through, so it's good to see they've added voice acting. I don't know if there's any big names doing the voices, but from what I've heard in the trailers, I have no problems. Everything sounds sound. The next change is the gameplay being rebalanced. I've actually played a bit of the original game myself and noticed that some battles are very easy due to specific skills. For example, in the prehistory scenario, you'll get an ally called Beru, and once you obtain her, you have a very brief section to level her up in, before she splits off the team and then returns back for the boss at the end of the scenario. In that brief section, you can level her up until she gets a skill called Lala, which requires to charge up, but does between 200 to 600 damage. You can kill the boss at the end in 2 to 3 Lalas. I've also heard that the endgame can be a bit tough due to the level gap between the protagonists. I don't know exactly what they're going to rebalance, most likely nerfing and buffing some skills, or maybe they rework a skill entirely. What was exploitable in the original game could very well be changed, or not. The last change I think that's worth mentioning is the music. In the original, the music was phenomenal, and guess who composed it? Yoko Shimomura. If you don't know her, understandable, but when I hear that name, I instantly think of the Kingdom Hearts series, one of her best works. Besides that, she's got quite the portfolio: Super Mario RPG, the Mario & Luigi series, Parasite Eve, and Xenoblade Chronicles to name a few. For the remake, she's returned, but this time she's orchestrating and arranging the soundtrack. If I had to choose one track as my favorite, it has to be Megalomania. And yes, that name did inspire Toby Fox to make the now popular Undertale track Megalovania. Here's what the original Megalomania sounds like. And here's what the remake sounds like. They even got Hironobu Kageyama, known for performing the Dragon Ball Z opening theme, Cha-La Head Cha-La, to provide the English and Japanese vocals of Go Go Buiki Dio, which plays in the near future scenario. I can't wait to hear that. Finally, it's time to discuss whether you should buy this game or not. The game is exclusive to Nintendo Switch on release. It's worth mentioning that there's a Live Alive demo you can try right now where you can play 3 scenarios: Twilight of Edo Japan, Imperial China, and the distant future. You'll be forced to stop at a certain point in each scenario, but you can carry your save file when it releases. The game costs £40 full price. It's not worth the full price, but if you find it discounted like I've done for £32, I think it's worth the purchase. As said before, Live Alive is releasing on the 22nd of July. The thing is, a week just after that is the release of Xenoblade Chronicles 3. If you're a big fan of Xenoblade, you're probably going to save the money and buy that instead. If you do plan to buy both, you can actually finish Live Alive before Xenoblade releases. The game is around more or less 18 hours long and you could probably finish it in a week. If you're thinking in terms of length and money, Xenoblade is probably going to be bang for your buck. And that's all for this video. This is the first time Live Alive is getting released worldwide. Even though there was a fan translation, I don't think a lot of people know about this game, including me. With the whole HD 2D remake, it'll most likely attract those who had played Octopath Traveler and Triangle Strategy, or those who are a big fan of JRPGs in general. Hopefully it sells well and the die-hard fans can carry the sales both in and outside of Japan. The HD 2D remake is perfect for a game like Live Alive. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this episode of Everything You Need to Know Before You Buy. Leave a comment below if you got any feedback in terms of the series, or if you got any questions about Live Alive. I'm probably going to work on a different video similar to my Lifeline and Hotel Dusk video, which you could check out on my channel. I'm still going to continue the series though, there are a lot more games coming out later in a couple of months. If you like the content I'm making and want to support, make sure to like and subscribe. And as always, I'll see you next time and catch you guys later. Take care.